Okay. So in the books, this will start on page 36, but before we go there, first of all, just a housekeeping, calendar housekeeping. Yesterday was the first day of the month of the Hebrew month of Rosh Chodesh, and next Sunday is the ninth day of Av, which we call Tisha B'Av. It's in a religion that focuses on being upbeat and positive. Tisha B'Av has a focus on recognizing the pain of the past and of the present. It's a fast day. We can call it a day focused. It's a sad day. Always with a kernel of optimism, but a sad day. So that's next week is a fast starting from next Saturday night until next Sunday night. We won't have the class next Sunday morning. We're in that a period of time known as the 9 days, which are started yesterday, and it's kind of zeroing in on the destruction of the temples, which is really just an emblem of the destruction we see in reality as Jews and as humanity. So there's a certain somberness to this period of time in Jewish communities around the world. Um, the Torah portion next week it's obviously well before there was a Tisha B'Av. It's the beginning of the fifth book of the Torah. So the first four books of the Torah are framed, it's all about lessons and instruction, but it's framed in a chronological framework, beginning with creation, going through the unfolding of humanity and of the Jewish people, and ending 5 books, ending with the passing of Moses and his being buried in the desert. And then after the 5 books, scripture moves on to the book of Joshua, who ultimately takes the Jews into Israel after Moses passes away. So, but as far as narrative, right now the 4 books, they cap off the 40 years in the desert. They really cap off most of the chronology. So in the last year of the Jews being in the desert, Miriam, who was Moses and Aaron's older sister, and there are these 3 leaders of the Jewish people, Miriam being the oldest, her brother Aaron 4 years younger, and then Moses 3 years younger than Aaron. These are the 3 leaders. Miriam passes away right before their last Passover in the desert. In other words, in their 40th year. Aaron passes away. Yesterday was his yahrzeit. Passes away the first of Av, and Moses passes away more like closer to Purim, in our calendar today, so moving forward until right before the Jews go into Israel. So these are the fifth book of the Torah is not it's different chronologically. It doesn't fit the flow, and it's also different even in its tense, in its literary level. The first 4 books of the Torah are written like from a narrator perspective, the omnipotent narrator. God said to Moses, Moses says to Jethro, Aaron says to it's the narrator. The fifth book of the Torah is Moses speaking to the Jewish people in the last 5 weeks of his life. He knows he's going to pass away, and it's his farewell address. And in his farewell address, he does a lot of recapping of everything they've been through. He's prepping them to move on to Israel because he's not going to make it to Israel. They will after he passes away, they'll spend 30 days mourning him, and then they'll go into Israel later. He knows that, and he really wants to be able to go to Israel, but he knows he can't. But a lot of it is in the recap. He's using these last 5 weeks to teach them some more painful lessons because sometimes giving criticism is not easy. And he's saying, I'm out of here soon anyway, so take it, just swallow it here. So there is definitely, I don't know, criticism, constructive criticism, rebukes, that is definitely very much there. Um, what we're going to talk about today is like we've been doing. It's a lesson we find in all of that, but it's not straight up a a study of what the Torah portion is. So I want to first go through a an overview of the Torah portion, even though it's only tangentially relevant to the discussion we're going to have today. So in actually in the books, it's on page 36. On the first day of the Hebrew month of Shevat, 37 days before his passing, right? So I said last 5 weeks, being a little rough with that. Moses begins his repetition of the Torah to the assembled children of Israel, reviewing the events that occurred and the laws that were given in the course of the 40-year journey from Egypt to Mount Sinai to the Promised Land, rebuking the people for their failings and iniquities because he wants them to do better going forward, and enjoining them to keep the Torah and observe its commandments in the land that God is giving them as an eternal heritage, into which they shall cross after Moses' death. Moses recalls his appointment of judges and magistrates to ease his burden of meting out justice to the people and teaching them the word of God. The journey from Mount Sinai to the great and fearsome desert, and the sending of the spies and the people's subsequent spurning of the promised land, so that God decreed that the entire generation of the excess would die in the desert. Also against me, says Moses, was God angry for your sake, saying, you too shall not go in there. In other words, I am not going to Israel because of you guys. Moses also recounts some more recent events: the refusal of the nations of Moab and Ammon to allow the Israelites to pass through their countries, the wars against the Amorite kings Sichon and Og, and the settlement of the lands by the tribes of Reuben and Gad and part of the tribe of Manasseh. These are of the 3 of the 12 tribes of Israel. And Moses' message to his successor, his student Joshua, who will succeed him in taking the land and lead them in the battle for its conquest. Fear them not in these battles, for the Lord your God, he shall fight for you. Okay. So that's just an overview of the Torah portion. Come to Shul, you'll be able to hear it, in the you can go through the whole next Saturday morning. What we're going to talk about today is, again, there's a departure point in this, but it's much more central to life, and it's the Torah's perspective. Torah is a manual for life, and Torah gives direction on not only what to do, but attitudinally. What the functional way of approaching life and of approaching ourselves and approaching our relationships in order to maximize our potential for the human experience. One of the things that the Torah makes pretty clear is that we need to keep on being useful. We need to keep on growing. And stagnating and saying, life is good, I don't need to do anything else, is not it's not good for the human condition. We always have new horizons of our own growth in relationships, personality, and our usefulness in the world, whatever it may be. And the Torah wants us to keep on the drive of being of accomplishing, again, within our own character and in our sphere of influence. So there's 2 important elements. First of all, the idea of recognizing that growth is a value, and then the idea that it only happens with work. Yeah, there was a rabbi who passed away, I think, over COVID. But his name was Rabbi Twersky, who was a very well-known rabbi, but he was a psychiatrist, and he had a rehab center in Pittsburgh, maybe a couple of them, called Gateways. So he wrote books about his work with people with dependencies, because he learned a lot. And he brought his Torah to it, and he brought lessons from human life to the Torah. I always found it fascinating. But I remember once I saw he wrote that when walking into his rehab center, there's a sign. Was the elevator to recovery is out of order. please try the 12 steps. And his point is that there's no there's no easy way. It means we got to work. And it's actually, if you look in the books, if you don't have it online, what would be page 35, their graphic, it was in the email I sent out. The graphic says upward is only an option, stagnation, even in holiness leads to regression. And what do they have there? It looks to me like an escalator. So I actually wrote on Friday when I looked at this to send out the email. I wrote to the editors. They do a great job, thanking them for what to do because I'm not really in touch with them, saying it's interesting that this is a lesson about human toil and progress, and your graphic is about machinery that was trying that was designed so you can get somewhere without toil. It's steps would have made sense here. An escalator, no, so oops, but that's the imagery that I'm talking about. It's the struggle. Some of you may have heard from me, but I'll, at the risk of being repetitious, I'll tell you something that I personally, a lesson that I remember ingesting when I was a student in yeshiva studying for my ordination. And I'm sure at least some of you have heard this from me before. Like 30 years ago, my kids told me I use it too much, so I try not to. In when I was studying for ordination, it's no longer part of the process. We had to study what makes for a kosher animal. There's a kosher species, that's something else. But if you have a kosher species and there's a proper slaughter, I wasn't studying that. But a kosher animal has to be a healthy animal. And therefore, part of preparing the food for your table, the steak or the chicken cutlet, is you have to get kosher species. It has to be prepared properly. And then, there was slaughtered properly. And then someone has to check it to make sure that it was healthy inside. And so there's certain diseases that can be assumed and that we look for, or especially if you see something before you slaughter it. If there's something wrong with it, what's considered a fatal disease. If it's something that our assessment is that it wouldn't have lived out the next 12 months, it's not a kosher animal. No matter if it's properly slaughtered. So for me, that was kind of a boring thing to study because it's actually pretty long, and I really wasn't planning on doing that for my life.
But this is fun.
What?
Fun.
That's why some guys like you loved it. Me, I was getting through it.
6 years doing that.
So I always was looking for different lessons I could get out of it. So one of the things there was in the Code of Jewish Law. It's really quoting from the Talmud. It gives paints a scenario of a bird. I'm at the banks of a river, let's say, and there's a bird flying, and it does a belly flop in front of me, and now it's floating in the river. It's a kosher species of bird. I happen to have my handy knife, and I'm hungry. So now the question is it worth it for me to reel this in? Is it alive? And if it's alive, is it just dying from the internal trauma? Or is it something where it's likely that if I reel it in, I'll find that it's okay inside, it's kosher. So the Talmud, the Code of Law gives a litmus test. It says, see how it's floating in the river. It said, if it's floating upstream, reel it in, there's a very good chance it's kosher, which means it's a very good chance that it's not only alive but viable for the future. If it's floating downstream, see if you can compare it to a branch or leaves near it. If it's floating quicker than the stream, reel it in. But if it's just floating with the stream, don't bother. So as a 20-year-old studying that, what struck me is that there's a metaphor for life there, which is definitely true looking through a Jewish perspective at how we live. To be psycho-spiritually and emotionally alive means to wake up in the morning or whatever it is, to look at ourselves and say, I can do better. I look at my life and now I can do better. I want to proactively improve on this. Sometimes we have to swim upstream. Sometimes I look at my life and say, my habits, my temper, whatever it is, and say, I can do better. That's alive. Not being alive is saying, that's me. You know, I do more than 30 years of, counseling, and, some people are leaving socks on the floors. Me, that's just what I do. Or you say, maybe you don't have to. It's a common male affliction. But the thing but the question is to just accept that this is me, or maybe it doesn't have to be me. That's called swimming upstream. I could say, no, I don't. I'm doing good. Doing good. Can I do better? And doing better means that I'm not just coasting. Coasting is seen as more the idea of course, you're alive, but you're not spiritually alive. The soul isn't alive. The blood isn't pumping to make a difference in our lives. I'm satisfied with status quo. Status quo is inertia, and inertia is a very strong force, and it can be paralyzing sometimes. But being alive means breaking out of the inertia. So it's either swimming upstream or quicker than the stream, but just saying, I'm just going to let life guide me where it does. That is, well, obviously, if a person is biologically alive, they're alive, but that's not living from a spiritual perspective. You want to be able to recognize that God put us here for a reason, and today there's new horizons for us to break through. That's going to be, in a nutshell, where we're going to be exploring today. So I want to start this on. We're not going to do the entire. Then there is an exploration of a Rashi, which is, maybe if we have time, it's a little bit more complicated and connected to nuances in language, which I think will be a little bit beyond what we want to do. What? Rashi is, Rashi is not complicated for a smart 5-year-old who knows Hebrew. Okay. So text 1, this is the beginning of the Torah portion. These are the words that Moses spoke to all of Israel. That not only knows Hebrew, is a master at Hebrew. These are the words that Moses spoke at 5 years old. Yeah, and very, very smart 5-year-old. These are the words that Moses spoke to all of Israel on the other side of the Jordan in the desert. This is, again, the opening of the 5th book of the Torah. This is, the whole 5th book is old Moses' final address in the plain opposite the Red Sea, between Paran and Tophel and Lavan and Chatzeres and Dizahav. He said to them, it's 11 days journey from Chorev, which is Mount Sinai, by way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. He opens with a rebuke. And what he says is, God took you out of Egypt. Took you out of Egypt for what? 2 major events. 1, get the Torah. 2, go to Israel. So you came 7 weeks. You came to Mount Sinai. You got the Torah. From there to Israel should have taken you 11 days, not 40 years. Took you 40 years, not because you were lost, because God didn't let you go. Why didn't God let you go? Because of God, of the sin of the spies and so on. But he is rebuking them and saying, life should have been so much simpler. Sinai and then Israel. And God really wanted you to get to Israel. And it says, it came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first of the month. Now that Moses spoke, this part is kind of the narrator introducing Moses speaking, and the rest of the book is all Moses in first person. On the first of the month, the Moses spoke to the children of Israel according to all that the Lord had commanded them regarding them. It says, this was after he had smitten Sichon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, O king of Bashan, who dwelt in Ashtaroth and Edrei. And the next one is, on the other side of the Jordan, the land of Moab, Moses commenced and complained this law, saying, God spoke to us in Chorev, saying, you have dwelt long enough at this mountain. He said, you stayed too long at this mountain, at Mount Sinai, because at Mount Sinai they stayed almost a year, just short of a year. They got the Torah, then the breaking of the tablets, the second tablets, the building of the tabernacle. They had a productive year, but they didn't move. So turn and journey and come to the mountain of the Amorites and all its neighboring places, in the plain, on the mountain, in the lowland, in the south, by the seashore, the land of the Canaanites, and the Lebanon, which is that area called today Lebanon, until the great river, the Euphrates River. See, I've set the land before you. Come and possess the land that the Lord swore to your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give them and their descendants after them. Okay, so.
All right, so what is the reason that Moses did not get into it? I heard different.
The Torah gives some different reasonings for it. One is of a mistake they made. He lost his temper. But I think that in general, because without getting off the topic, in general, the idea was that if many of his people were being buried in the desert, he needed to be there with them. And when all Jews go into Israel, Mashiach, that's when he'll go. It'll stay behind. I'll give you just one thought there, and then we'll move forward with this. The former chief rabbi of Israel, should live and be well, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau. He's a towering figure physically, and he's a towering figure in Jewish life, and he's actually a Holocaust survivor, and he's been to Morristown at the college several times. And the last time I was there, he told me that his forgot the city his family comes from in Poland, but he's descended from rabbis after rabbis after rabbis. He has a long lineage of rabbis. Remember, the number was a large number. So he says in that city where his grandfather was a rabbi in a synagogue, they brought in as the rabbi of the city after the lead rabbi passed away of old age and was very well respected. They hired a 22-year-old named Rabbi Meir Shapiro, a great genius. He's the one who instituted the practice that maybe some of you have seen, became a little more known in the past 15, 20 years, of studying one page a day of Talmud and finishing every 7 years. That's Rabbi Meir Shapiro's time. So some people thought he was too young. So they brought him the first time to speak to the community. And he spoke. He was brilliant. And then some wise guy in the back, he said, if they're asked of any questions, some wise guy raised his hand and asked, do you believe, Rabbi Shapiro, in resurrection of the dead? So he said, of course. So he said, so when there's resurrection of the dead and all of our great rabbis come back, who's going to need you? They were greats. They were incredible, well-known rabbis. What's going to be your place? So Rabbi Shapiro said, the beautiful thing about the resurrection of the dead, it's not just for rabbis, it's for everybody. So I'll have you. I'll be with you guys. I mean, he knew that this guy was pulling his chain, and he did it back. Then this guy said, "But what if none of us merit to come back?" He said, "There, Rabbi Shapiro got serious, and he said, a rabbi who agrees to be resurrected without his congregation is not a rabbi. It's loyalty." The idea is that Moses, to answer your question, Moses was buried in the desert to be with his people who were left behind. I would leave it that way, although the Torah often talks about different ideas. Okay.
Under 20 came from Egypt to come to Holy Land. And so the whole generation will die off to be slave, and new generation.
It was the generation who rejected Israel, but he didn't reject Israel. That was the generation of the spies.
Okay, so he was already 80 years old when he came from Egypt.
Right.
Not under 20.
No, it was under 20 at the time of the spies, not when they left Egypt. But it doesn't make a difference. He was, but it's not that relevant to that because it was a punishment for a specific thing that he didn't need to be punished for. 120. Okay, so now we're going to turn to text 5, which is on page 41. It's from one of the classic Torah commentators, and he zeroes in on what the Torah says. You have dwelt long enough at this Mount Turner journey. He says this is the first rebuke. Why is that a rebuke? Because first of all, God didn't tell. They were following orders, and there were clouds of glory. When the clouds of glory moved on, they knew they had to move, and they had a job to do at the mountain. Why is Moses rebuking them? It's because they didn't want to leave. They were happy. They're at the mountain. They see Mount Sinai. They have the holiness. They have Moses teaching them Torah. They have a tabernacle. They're living on manna. They have protection. They have miraculous water. We're good. They're not looking to move to Israel. It's not that they could only go if God allowed them to go, but they weren't itching to go. Why? Because moving to Israel would mean that now they have to build societies, farms, hold a mortgage, all that stuff. They were being taken care of. They'd have to work. And there was a work for it. They were enjoying the spirituality without the annoyance of a lot of their more physical burdens. Say it again. Yeah. Yeah. It's a very good question. There has to be some type of productivity, but that's a great question. What will happen in the times of Mashiach? It's not for here right now, but it built in is that there's always this idea of being of the goal and the ability to progress. So it says, this is the first rebuke. For the people despised the land and chose to settle permanently on this mountain instead of turning their attention to the land, which is a special place for fulfilling mitzvahs. You should have realized that the goal was to get to Israel. And not just, yes, there's a struggle, but there you get to do certain mitzvahs that you can't do in the desert. So the language that what?
Basically, he's creating a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
Who's that?
God.
Why?
You stayed too long, but I said you're going to stay until everybody dies.
No, this was before that. This is at the sin of the spies happened after this. They were there because they They had work to do, and they were doing good things, and they couldn't go until God told them. But they didn't ask, like, when are we going to get to Israel already? That's when we're going to be able to do the mitzvahs. They were happy. They were content. That's inertia. So, too much for you is similar to the phrase, too much for yourselves, children of Levi. This is something else. The language that's used here, that Moses used, which means it's not enough that you are rebelling going against the proper path. The truth is, settling permanently on this mountain is not right for you. Turn your face towards the land. So Moses rebukes them for not trying to push the envelope and let's get to Israel already. We're excited to go to Israel. And as the Rebbe explains in text 6, here Moses wanted to explain to the Jewish people the progression of events, starting from their situation at the time of receiving the Torah up until their current situation on the other side of the Jordan. He's going over 40 years here. He emphasized that in truth, the Jews should have entered the land of Israel shortly before after being at Mount Sinai. They should have just gone straight. The delay was partially because they were delayed emotionally, because they weren't pushing to go. So, okay, first we're going to send spies, and then the spies screwed up and they ended up staying there. It was only because of the sin of the spies that they were laid in the desert so long. Therefore, it must be pointed out that even back then, when the Jews were still at Mount Sinai, God told them they should go straight to the land of Israel. God was saying, Sinai, Israel, you're here, build the tabernacle, all of that, but they should have known, because they did know that the next step was to go to Israel, and they should have been pushing. When are we going to go to Israel already? You want us to make a tabernacle? We did a tabernacle. Now what? Why are we here? But they didn't do that. They were happy. Based on this, it's clear why the verse says you have dwelt long enough at this mountain. That's why Moses says in this week's Torah portion that I told you guys, or God told us, you've dwelt long enough here. It emphasizes how strongly God wished for the Jewish people to immediately enter the land of Israel. Despite the great merits that came from this day at Mount Sinai, being at Mount Sinai was a great place. They built a tabernacle, they built the menorah, they organized Jewish life, they created a great court, all of those things. They spent their time well. But they really needed to move on to go to Israel. Gathering there too long without moving forward was too much. And that's the entry point that the Rebbe uses here. We're talking about God, where God is saying, you're too complacent. You're happy with good things. Speed it up. Swim quicker than the stream. So, and we move to text 8 on 44. This is also from the Rebbe. A Jew must understand that the psychological state of sitting, meaning of immobility, inertia, staying in one place, remaining on the same level in serving God, and not progressing or striving higher, is enough for you. In its simplest meaning, too much. If I know, I look at myself and I say, this is my parenting. This is my, I'm here in my relationships. I'm here as a Jew, and I'm pretty much the same for the past year. God is saying it's too much to be in the same place. You're standing there too much. Move. You can do better. So Judaism has this consistent call for growth. And it's I know watching the Rebbe and hearing that all the time, it's a little tiring because you want to just relax. But he's saying is you're alive. You have another day. Why this day has to be, there has to be some growth. This day has to be where you did something that makes the world better, that you grew. No matter how good and high one's level of service may be, staying in that place too long is giving up too much time. A person must be on a journey, constantly striving, moving higher, and ascending holiness. And as will be mentioned here, there's a language in the scripture where God calls humanity movers, mobile ones, in comparison to angels who are stationary. Angels have great spiritual awareness, that you and I can't reach. But they are who God created them to be. They don't grow. And they don't do sins. They are who they are. So there's no, they are stationary. They were not designed as growing human beings. They are growing beings. They're static in who they are. In the morality of it, and in the idea of how the Torah sees the world, it's only humans who can truly grow in their sense of morality and self-refinement. Even animals, you can train animals in different ways. And some animals might have a more compassionate nature, and some animals have a less compassionate nature, and sometimes you can train them out of it. But an animal doesn't have the capacity for self-awareness, doesn't have or self-analysis. I don't think anybody, I'm not a pet owner, but I don't think you can think of a pet who looks in the mirror and says, I need to lose a few pounds. And it doesn't work that way. Or a pet, or a pet who is, you get a new dog who says, this is a nice place. I love my owner. I'm not going to pee on the carpet anymore. It doesn't work that way. You teach it. Pavlovian. So human beings have the capacity to say, I just lost my temper. That's my natural instinct. I want to deal with that. Or I just had too much chocolate. It's not good for me. I want to deal with that. That's a distinctly human idea, and it's all about growth. I'm speaking about whatever our human instincts, but it's really about our spiritual connectedness that we need to grow. So in text 9, a quote from the Talmud. Rabbi Chia bar Ashi, a rabbi of the Talmud, quoted his teacher, Rav, who said, Torah scholars have rest neither in this world nor in the world to come. When it says Torah scholars, it doesn't mean Torah scholars necessarily. That means they know this much or that much. It means spiritually aware people. A spiritually conscious human being doesn't rest either in human life nor in the world to come. As in both worlds, they're constantly progressing. As it's stated, they'll go from strength to strength. Every one of them appears before God in Zion. What does that mean? So let's look at 10. What does it mean they don't have no rest? That sounds not a good thing. We say rest in peace, right? Text 10, the Talmud doesn't mean to say that Talmud scholars have no rest. Obviously they do, in the sense that they don't have stresses. What it means is that they keep on growing. It means that the level of a Torah scholar is never fully complete. A Torah scholar is always trying to improve. The word used here for Torah scholar in the Talmud, which is the universal term for Torah scholar, is a Talmid Chacham. A Talmid Chacham means a wise student. So you can be talking about someone acknowledged as the greatest master of Talmud in the entire world, and we say he's a great Talmid Chacham. He's a great student. Not a great student. He's a great teacher. The point is that scholars are always looking for opportunities to study more. They're always looking to be able to learn more. They're curious, which is also a skill, and they're open to learning because they're not complacent saying, I know it all already. And they're driven because if I have a day, why shouldn't I study more? I want to learn more. I want to figure out more. The intellect does not reach a state of perfection because there's no end or limit to understanding. As great as that person is, someone might be in their understanding, there's more to get. Once a person grasps one thing, this is in text 10, it's always possible to understand more, and therefore the intellect never reaches completion. And this is from a great of the 1500s, known as the Maharal of Prague. If you ever saw the show about the Golem, he's the one who made the Golem famous. He says, his insight into this is that a person was created to work, not to rest. Work doesn't mean necessarily in a cubicle for pay. It means to be industrious. It means to be useful. It means to be somehow creative in my own life, to figure out something, how I can improve myself, improve on a relationship. That's all called work. It means to be creative, to look at the world as it stands and try to shape it. They're meant to manifest their potential always, without ever stopping. And he frames it as bringing out your potential, because as much as accomplished as we are, there's always more potential. There's potential for more. This is the natural order of creation. Everything was created to be whole and not lacking. And a person can't reach a sense of wholeness until they're fully engaged and active. Our wholeness personality is our personality with its all its pistons firing. I'm alive. I'm engaged. And if I'm alive and engaged, I want to tackle life. And I want to shape life and improve on it. That means my life or the community around me. This is what true completeness looks like. Always in motion, constantly bringing potential into action. Again, this can sound tiring, and it is. So that in order to be creative, it takes some time to rest. But the goal is to consistently make something out of life. Yes.
I would question the concept of completeness there. I mean, it certainly agrees with the Pirkei Avot, saying it's not up to you to complete the task.
Right.
However, I would say development rather than completeness.
I think that's as a translation goes. I think I would agree with you. Their translation is a good translation of the Hebrew here, but I think what he means is it's not completion. We never reach completion, but development is good. Actualization. Okay.
Rabbi Herson, can I ask a question? It's Lori.
Hi, sure.
Hi. Is that why
Hi.
God gives us tests? Like, because we've become so complacent, he pushes us even though we don't want this test. He's telling us it's time to grow. And if we couldn't reach past this test, we wouldn't be growing.
That's a great question. And the Nachmanides, who was one of our great thinkers, he asked, because the idea of tests comes up a few times in the scripture, and they ask, a teacher needs tests in order to know how much student knows or how much they've progressed. God doesn't need to test us to know. God knows us better than we know ourselves. But the test is it's not for the teacher to find out, it's for the student to find out. For us to know, to be able to see, our real values and to see how far we can go. And one of the things that Nachmanides quotes in that is a verse from Psalms, which says that God tests the righteous. And what does that mean? He's saying is that if God tested you, he's testing the righteous. He's not going to give you a test that he knows you're going to fail. Or that he knows you have to fail. If God tests us, that means God believes that we have the capacity to ace this test, to be able to come out the other side. And when we come out the other side, what we've done is we have expressed, and this is all Nachmanides, but this is about Hasidic thought, fleshes it out. We become more complete because, if I've never had, if I believe something and I pray and I teach it, but I've never been tested where that I have to really stand up for that value, that principle, when it's difficult because my life hasn't given me those tests. I believe in it, but can I be certain that it's so important to me that I would sacrifice comfort to keep it? And the answer is no. Listen, I grew up observant. I see people who make well, I'm going to call sacrifices in their lives and their comfort level to do things they weren't raised to do. I have respect for it. I also know that I never had those tests. So as much as I think or hope I would make the same choice, I can't be so sure about that. I can't be sure until it happened to me. So I think if I understood your question correctly, I think that God gives us those tests for us to actualize, to see for our own benefit, to see where we stand. And if he gives us those tests, it's with the idea that it's not, it wouldn't give us a test we had no chance of facing.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the question. Okay, so now go back to sharing. All right. So this is what true completeness looks like, and I think Eric is correct. It means self-actualization, always in motion, constantly bringing potential into action. It's like the sky, which is always moving and never comes to rest. It can't exist without movement. The movement itself is what makes it complete. And so a person wasn't created to rest or be fully complete from the beginning. They can't reach the end of their work in a state of rest and perfection. We're all a work in progress. And if you're alive, you know there's your work in progress. If I'm alive today, I can't theologically say I'm done with my life's work. If I'm done with my life's work, why did God give me another day? Obviously, I've got more to do. Their completeness comes from always striving, constantly bringing their potential into reality. Okay. Now in text 12 and 47, this is a quote from the first chief rabbi of modern Israel, Rabbi Abraham Yitzchak Cohen Cook, and he writes, pleasure is connected to everything according to its nature. What was it? Pleasure means satisfaction. The completeness of active powers is that nothing can prevent or block them from carrying out the function. Resting from action goes against their nature and purpose. What he's saying is, I have muscles, I have a capacity, I want to use them. And if I don't use them, then it inside it aches. Now that's muscles. What if I have a skill? And I speak to people about this all the time as they think about retirement. If I have a skill, it doesn't mean that I have to work in that office or in that area until I'm 90 or 120. But if I have acquired a skill and I feel good about it, then using it is good for me. And you don't want to practice that anymore? Maybe you can mentor or teach. It's we don't, if we have something good, we want to be able to use it. If I have a good voice, which I don't, but if I have a good voice, I want to be able to use it and sing it. And using my skills makes me is satisfying inside, because it's not something, one of the things in life that I've recognized in working with people is there are often there's a dissatisfaction or regret for unutilized potential. I could have been this, I could have been that, I could have done this. And it's obviously, we can't do everything, but we want to especially try to look at our potential and exercise it. For Torah scholars who are influenced by their own strength and stand ready to influence and guide others, this is the essential nature of their souls, to be active. And again, when I say Torah scholars, I mean spiritually conscious people. Just do something, make an impact, be useful. You're not working, you're not drawing a salary anymore, you don't have those office anymore. Don't sell yourself short. You can still be useful. Therefore, their pleasure and fulfillment come only from constant ongoing action. That's why the ultimate enjoyment for them is a continuous movement and action that never stops. Susan, they go from strength to strength. And this is from someone known as the Gaon of Vilna, the Vilna Gaon, who was a leader of the non-Hasidic world at the time, when the Hasidic movement was growing so gesund. And he writes some spiritual books, and he writes that a person is called a mover. I mentioned before that in Scripture, that there is the idea that God says that I'm giving you, we are the mobile ones amongst the stationary ones, who are the angels, because they must always move from one level to the next. If they don't keep rising, they will fall, heaven forbid, because it's impossible to stay on one level forever. This is actually something that the Talmud tells us, that it's in a way it's like you're on a hill with roller skates. You're either moving up or you're going to start sliding down. And we want to try to better ourselves in whatever sphere we're thinking about right now. And just saying, now I'm going to stay this way, with time, it's going to degrade. That's just human nature. So we want to have the umph to try to increase so we don't decrease. And this is from another great of the from the 1700s, the Panim Yafos. He said a person is called a mover, and this is on 49. And as the verse says, and I have given you a mover among those who stand, a verse in Zechariah. It also says the path of life is upward for the wise to turn away from the grave below, which is in Proverbs. Standing still is not for a person, like the angels who are called standers, because whenever a person innovates something new in the truth of the Torah, they rise higher, as the verse says, from one day to the next, he utters speech. So in Torah we can progress, but in anything we can progress. In our human development we need to progress. If heaven forbid he or she turns away from this, they fall. That's why it says to turn away from the grave below, because if they don't rise, they naturally fall. And that's why a person is called a mover. In other words, we need to be mobile. That's really hardwired into us. With this, and for us to be happy and feeling functional, we want to grow. We want to be useful. With this, we can explain what Rabbi Yossi says in the Talmud. I've never spoken a word and then gone back on it. When God grants a person the ability to rise to the levels of Torah and to innovate in it, they must be very careful not to turn back. In other words, it's not to have gone back on it that I violated it, that I never regressed. And finally, 14b will be the last one. He says, a righteous person is called a mover, while an angel is called a stander. In other words, immobile versus mobile. As it says, I've given you walks, well, I don't know, walkers probably, among those who stand. The reason for this is that a person moves from one level to the next, as our sages say. As sages grow older, their understanding becomes more settled. The angels stand on the same level forever. For us, as we grow, things shift. And now, as the knowledge that we had at 30, maybe now is more settled and mature and wise, but it's knowledge. And it's something that I can use, as long as I can use it and utilize it, it's better for my personality, it's better for my own growth, and it's better for my own inner happiness. So I'm going to leave that there. I had mentioned before, I want to make sure everyone here's it, I'll send out an email. Also, next Sunday is Tisha B'Av, so we're not going to be having this class. If there are any questions, we can do it now. Services, I'll let you know. Watch your emails. Got to check with it. I only work here. But there probably should be services, yeah. Okay? Okay. Have a good one.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.